If you're in the market for a monitor, you've probably seen those curved monitors around. Huge displays with more of a bend than the latest in trendy foldable phone design. If you've never had a display with a curve to it, these panels might seem weird. But today we're going to demystify curved monitors and tell you everything you need to know about them. So what's the point of a curved monitor? Should you get one? And are all curves built the same? As always, the answers here aren't so simple and will depend on what you're looking for, the monitor you're looking at, and your budget. That aside, there are many cases where a curve will be more than worth it, and there are many other instances where a curve is nothing more than marketing speak. If you want to know which is which, stick around, strap in, and let's jump into curved monitors versus flat monitors. Which you should buy. There isn't an insanely technical, hard-to-understand reason why monitors are often curved nowadays. It's basically what you'd expect. Monitors are often curved, particularly large displays, to fill up more of your peripheral vision and be easier to focus on and take in as you sit and stare at them. However, this doesn't mean that flat monitors are hard to view or take in. These kinds of concerns only start to amount to much when you have a certain aspect ratio, resolution, and size when it comes to your display. This may sound particular, but it's not especially specific. In practice, monitors with especially large form factors as well as aspect ratios outside the norm of 16:9 can and often will be curved. A more traditional monitor, like say a 27-inch 1440p panel, has a traditional aspect ratio, 16:9, and isn't overwhelmingly large, so there isn't any particular struggle to focus on the action happening on screen. An ultra-wide monitor with the 21:9 aspect ratio that clocks in above 30 inches, that's a different story. These kinds of panels are really big and much harder to take in all the information you can from one glance. Slight curves, nothing insane, are introduced to compensate for this troubling effect. In practice, looking at a curved monitor head-on will still feel normal and appear as if you're looking directly at your display and not some specific section the curve forces you to look at. A curve can be quite effective given the right setup, but it can do absolutely nothing in the wrong setup. How did we get to curved monitors? It's all about shape, or rather aspect ratio. When we say a screen is 16:9, we're referring to its proportions. Imagine a rectangle composed of 16 squares across and 9 squares down. This shape, this format, is 16:9, and it corresponds to a number of resolutions that fit this format, like 720p, or 1080p, or 1440p, etc. Since the days of CRT monitors, which were often 4:3 or square, as well as early LCD panels, which often were 4:3 as well, 16:9 has become the dominant aspect ratio. But as hardware advances and higher resolutions are attainable, and new displays can be cheaply created, more options are available to the average consumer. Nowadays, you can buy monitors in 16:10, 16:9, 4:3, 21:9, or even 21:10, depending on what sort of shape you want your screen to be. More widescreen formats like 21:9 often necessitate larger screen sizes to be effective and immersive, but these screens are so physically large that users can sometimes be forced to turn their heads to see the whole screen. To suit aspect ratios like those at large sizes, curves were introduced to monitors to help keep them practical and to make it just a little bit easier to take in all the information on your screen without having to do too much or any physical work yourself. A wide aspect ratio on a large curved monitor is an incredibly immersive experience, and depending on how close you sit to the screen as well as your sound setup can be akin to VR. When should you look for a curved display? While the screen size and aspect ratio and resolution and everything in between influence the value of a curve, enormous TVs, for example, aren't always curved. In fact, many of them aren't. Wouldn't these displays benefit from the same thing? And if so, why isn't that a bigger deal for TVs? The fact of the matter is that depending on how far away from your screen you're sitting, a curve can have little to no effect regardless of what screen size you have or aspect ratio. This is due to the simple fact that if a screen is far enough away from you, you'll be much more able to take in all of its information at once just by staring in its direction. However, many of the benefits of high resolutions as well as nice high-end displays can really only be appreciated if you sit close enough to the screen to actually pick up on the fine detail. So if you sit too far from your screen, you might not have any issues, but you might not be enjoying your experience as much as you easily could entirely for free. As a rule of thumb, when looking at a monitor you intend to keep within a foot or two of your face, if it's an unusual aspect ratio like 21:9 or 21:10, or above 30 inches in size, then a curve can be a good idea. However, if you plan to stick with a familiar aspect ratio like 16:9, depending on your preferences and setup, even a 32+ inch monitor might not need a curve for you to take everything in. To some extent, a curve is preferential. It's self-intended to make a viewer's experience more pleasant, while every viewer is a little different. If you thought somehow curving a screen would be cheaper than the normal flat panels, we've got bad news. The good news is that unlike it once was, a curved display isn't always a sign of a high-end luxury product. Many economical, affordable monitors will be curved as well as TVs. This isn't always one-to-one either, because not all monitors will have curved and flat variants priced differently for you to judge. On average though, expect to pay anywhere from a 10% to 30% bonus for the privilege of the curve. For pricey, expensive monitors at say $750+ that are big and 21:9, these will often just come curved and that'll be factored into the price. No other option to choose from or price to compare to, so you won't really be paying more for the curve at the high end, just more for a better display. Oftentimes too, different monitors will have different features aside from a curve, so it's very regularly not so simple to suss out how much a curve is specifically. You will likely pay more for a curved monitor than you would a flat one, but how much more will vary as well as how useful this curve will be. In the world of TVs, it's super common for a set to be used by multiple people watching from widely different angles. In this respect, a curve might help you, the person sitting front and center out, but it might take away from the viewing experience of other people. These kinds of issues aren't a concern with a monitor, but like with televisions, curves are not night and day. They aren't like features like HDR or variable refresh rate, or amazing contrast or anything else. They can be a nice quality of life, high-end craftsmanship sort of bonus feature you can appreciate, but they won't solve issues with your setup if you've got them, and they won't blow you away either. More often than not, most people with curved displays or TVs didn't set out to choose a curve or flat panel, but rather they looked for a set of features and at reviews, and settled on a screen they liked that also happened to be curved. And as discussed earlier, with the right size and aspect ratio, a curve can be a good thing and not at all something to avoid. So over the course of your monitor search, if you find a panel you like that's curved, if it's a reasonable size and aspect ratio, and only costs as much as a bit more than what you'd expect to pay, pick up the curved display. Otherwise, don't sweat too much about whether or not your monitor is curved. Ultimately, when looking for a monitor, characteristics like refresh rate, contrast ratio, resolution, response time, and what kinds of features it supports, like HDR or adaptive sync, are much more important than whether or not a monitor is curved. Though, a curve can be a tiebreaker.